talk a little bit about sort of like how the physical body compares to the spiritual body, and the other dimension that creates this physical one for an individual? Can you talk about that?
Well, there's lots of bodies that we generate, and all of these bodies tend to be metaphors. It's just like the chakras are metaphors. They're not fundamental. So we have a etheric body, which is supposedly a non-physical body close to our physical. It's kind of the health body, if you will. And then we have an emotional body, and then we have sometimes what's called a causal mental body. We have a spiritual body, and most of this is Hindu theology, if you will. And most of those bodies are associated with chakras and other things. Those are ways of interpreting the data. In other words, these bodies do exist. Besides they do exist in data. They don't exist as fundamental things in themselves. The information exists. We interpret them visually in terms of these bodies. Okay, now there's another thing that we do. We take things like, okay, there's us, then there's an oversoul or a higher self, and then there's an individuated unit of consciousness. So we start to build up this hierarchy. And the reason we do that is just so we can talk about it. We need, we're just a fragment of a larger consciousness system, and we want to talk about the whole of us. So then we coin words like higher self and oversoul to do that. But we're just making up these words to fit a concept so that we can discuss the concept. Again, these aren't fundamental. They're just conceptual. They're just metaphors so we can understand it. We need to break things down into pieces so that we can deal with them with language and with our thoughts.
So like after this body dies, like does it go, does the spirit that is still, do you believe that spirit then goes back with everything else, or there's some kind of still maintains some individual integrity, or does it just go back with the large consciousness?
Both. It does both. You are consciousness. This body is just an interpretation of data. This is just a virtual body. It's not real. The only thing that's fundamental is consciousness. So you're a consciousness system. Now you're in this multiplayer game, and in this game you have a body, just like you're in World of Warcraft and you got a lizard guy, with a long tail, and he walks around. It's kind of the same sort of thing. When the lizard guy falls in the pond and drowns, it's not a really big deal. You're still fine behind the joystick and moving the mouse. It's the same way. The lizard guy was just a data in a computer. Well, so is your body, just data in a computer. So when the body dies, you're just still consciousness. There's nothing really. It's just a transition of your awareness. It's a focus of where your attention's placed. So now your consciousness in the larger consciousness system, you're also one with the larger system. So yes, you are always a part of the larger system. But now you're thinking about, what about my personal identity? Is my personal identity conserved? Well, all the data that is you, all the things you've done, said, think, all the choices you've made, sure, that's all there. That's all captured. So all that data is uniquely and specifically you. And you have a larger consciousness system. You are an individuated unit of consciousness. And that individual unit of consciousness has had many yous. Different times, different places, different circumstances, maybe even different universes. And all of those together kind of feed its overall identity. So there's the you that exists as this historical you, all the things you did, thought, said, felt. Then there's the bigger you that's an accumulation of all of the things that the larger consciousness has said, done, thing in all its various incarnations. And then there's the larger consciousness system of which it's a part. And all of those things are all existing simultaneously. It's not like you have to get rid of one to get the other. They all exist at the same time. You have your individual data, you have your oversoul or higher self data, and you also are just one with the larger consciousness system. You're already integrated with that system. We tend to have to separate everything. It's one of our beliefs. There's me, and there's everything outside of me, and we're separate. And we tend to do that when we think of the larger consciousness system, just like we tend to make tunnels and dress Uncle Fred in a plaid shirt. We tend to make ourselves and everything else outside ourselves. So here's me, and I'm I'm my individual, and then here's the higher self, and then here's the larger system, and these all little individual systems. They're not individual like that. It's all one mixed mush of thing. An idea is that in your computer, if you have a Word file, that Word file is not a bunch of little 1 and 0s somewhere in the corner of your disk drive. That Word file is spread all over your disk drive. It's integrated over the whole drive. That's why every once in a while you have to defragment the drive, because all your files are just spread all over the drive and it becomes inefficient. Well, that's the way we are in the larger consciousness system. We're just data. We're spread all over the place. We are indeed one with the larger consciousness system. We're not a little pile of data off to the side with our name tag on it. We're one with the system. So is our larger self. It's just a different data set. It's like we're a subset of data within our oversoul, which is a larger set of data, which is itself a subset within the larger consciousness system.
Tom, can you expand, please, on the spiral torsion wave that scientists would call it and spiritualists would call it the love light energy?
The love light energy? Again, energy is a metaphor. Okay? Energy is a metaphor. There's only one active ingredient, and that's consciousness. All the rest are metaphors. I don't know a whole lot about the spiral wave, but we tend to want to make metaphors that suit the way we think. So if you tend to be a person that likes process and detail and everything in its place, you tend to make very detailed models or metaphors. You know, you can read some Eastern literature where there's 375 planes. Each plane has 37 phases of some, and it goes on and on and on with this immense breakdown and structure, and absolutely none of it is necessary. It's just a way of describing things, and some people like a lot of detail in their process, and some people like it to sound like science. Some people like to make it sound technical because that makes it sound more credible. So suddenly they're talking about frequency. They're talking about other kinds of quasi-science, words that apply to it. But these are all just metaphors. So I'm not familiar with the detail of what you're saying, but there's an awful lot of things like that where the metaphors tend to sound technical, but they're just metaphors. And the metaphors that are non-technical, like love and peace, and I think through my heart, and these are all metaphors about how you maybe deal with the world, and they're just as good. They're just not as specific. So I can't answer your question too well because I don't really know about it, but that's my best guess in general. Yeah, don't take any of the metaphors too seriously. Read between the lines to see what you get.